Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's Rabbi Stephen here. A little bit different environment using the smartphone to record a little bit, and hopefully the light. I mean, from my point of view, it looks a little dark, but let's see how it goes. So Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach, because this Saturday is also Pesach. It is the 8th day of Pesach, and there is a special Torah reading. But first, for those of you that came out to our second Seder at B'nai Chaim, hope you had a great time. It was fun for me. It was my first time leading a community Seder, and people were great. And kudos to Chris and Heather from I guess it's Palm Springs. They did the catering, and great thanks to Carmen and Harriet and Susie Suster, who organized it. Beautiful work. Also to Susan Welsh and Johanna Lack that were helping, and Dick Hirschman, our president. It was, it was good, but I tell you, there's always room for improvement. Anybody who has been in the sanctuary, you look up at the bima and you look over to the right, and there's my office. And I hope you all notice that the door is typically open. Every now and then it gets closed, but it's open. And that's not just physical. It's also kind of symbolic. I like to think my door's always open. People have given me feedback as to services, sometimes too much feedback, but that's okay. Better and more than not enough. So if you have any suggestions, things you'd like to see next year, then or going forward to some of the other community events we'd love to hear from you. Again, it's not just our synagogue. It's not just mine. It's not just the board synagogue. It's your synagogue. And interestingly enough, we can segue right into this particular Torah portion, because as last week's Torah portion, this is a special Torah portion. It is special when the 8th day falls on Shabbat. So this Torah portion comes from the book of Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy, for those of you that know a little bit of, I think it's Greek, deutero means second. Those of you who are science-oriented understand what a hydrogen atom is. It's got a protein in the middle, and you've got one electron circling it. So there is an isotope of hydrogen. A isotope, of course, is when you have different versions of the same element, and those versions depend on how many neutrons are in the center. So hydrogen atom has only a proton and an electron. A hydrogen atom that has a neutron in it is called deuterium. It's heavy hydrogen, and those of you that remember World War II, the Nazis were experimenting with heavy water, which is not just H2O, but it's deuterium oxide. It has deuterium instead of the regular hydrogen. And it's called deuterium because it is the second isotope, regular hydrogen being the first. And that's where we get the word Deuteronomy. It's a repeat. It's the second retelling of the Torah. So in this particular portion, it talks about giving tithes and giving charity. So why would we have that theme in Passover? Because again, we're supporting the ministers, that is the priests, the Kohanim, and the Levites who caretake the temple, the big temple, the great temple, see? So we talk about how people get involved, right? So the people, the rest of the Israelites supported the Kohanim and the Levites. They were ministering to Hashem for them. It's not like they were intermediaries, but they were doing that work. So as far as the tithes go, and what is a tithe? It's also Greek or Roman or Latin for tenth. So people were required or asked to give 1/10 of their income of whatever they did, however they made their living, to take care of the Kohanim and the Levites so that they could spend all their time ministering to the Israelites by taking care of the temple. So they would do the sacrifices, they would take care of the wood, and people would also donate animals when they wanted to do an offering, or birds sometimes, or grain for the mincha, which is the offering. And the Kohanim would be the ones that would do that for them. Okay, so it's not like they're the intermediary between the people, the Israelites, and Hashem. That was their job. Okay, so what is this about the tithes and how does that work in? Well, in Hebrew, the word for charity is tzedakah, which is the same word as justice. Tzedek, justice, justice shall you do. So charity, our concept of charity is to do justice, is to do God's work. Hashem put us on this earth to do his work, to take care of people that are having kind of a tough time taking care of themselves. Who are those people? They are people who are poor, which is the stranger, the proselyte who has just become part of, Kahelet Yisrael, the congregation of Israel, the widows and the orphans that may have lost, the man who traditionally is the one who goes off and makes the money, right? And also the Levites and the Kohanim are considered to be ani, poor, because they don't really have a means to support themselves. They're the ones that are devoting their time to the temple. They're not devoting their time to make, to herding cattle or being farmers or whatever. See? So tzedakah, charity, is something that we need to do. Now, another thing I want to mention too, and I've had this discussion, and Ellis, this is for you out in England, right? The question is, how often are we supposed to eat matzah? So we all know that in Passover, we're not supposed to eat any leavened products. In the Torah, I have found 3 or 4 places in the Torah. Last week's portion, right? Exodus 12. Then the next chapter, chapter 13, also in Leviticus, that's the second day of Pesach. That's that Torah portion. And then next Saturday for Shabbat, I think it was in Deuteronomy, it says, you will eat matzah, you will eat unleavened bread for 7 days. Now, there is a discussion that the rabbis have said, well, they use exegesis. And exegesis, as you can imagine, is just kind of pulling out information from the verbiage in the Torah, and they have come to the conclusion that there's mention of 6 days or 7 days you do this, and then 6 days do that. And it's in the Talmud tractate Pesachim 120, I think it's Daf A. They talk about, well, since it mentions 6 days, you're only required to eat matzah for the first day of Pesach, and then for the other 6 days, you can eat matzah. It's optional. But I have to tell you, folks, looking at the Torah, it says Sheva Yamim, 7 days, Ye'echol, you will eat matzah. It says that. So where they get this exegesis, I don't know. Maybe I should go on to the Talmud and state my opinion as a rabbi now, which I can do. And interestingly enough, in the Talmud, even though the reason why it's so expansive is because people debate these things. They wonder, well, why is it that we have to eat, matzah for the full 7 days? Why, where it's optional? Now that brings up another point. In the Torah, it says the first day of Passover is, a holy day, and lo malacha tasu, no work shall you do, and it talks about the Pesach. And yet out here in the diaspora in exile, we celebrate for 2 days. Now somebody once brought up the idea to me that by making Passover 2 days, we are adding to the Torah. At the end of Deuteronomy, Moshe Rabbeinu says, this Torah is perfect as it is. Do not add, do not subtract. And yet here the rabbis are saying, well, instead of just 1 day out here in exile, we're going to observe Passover for 2 days. Now, the reason we did that is kind of archaic because, it was tough sometimes knowing when the new moon was, which signaled the new month, when that was going to be. You had messengers that carried the message. You needed 2 witnesses. Like, oh yeah, well, we know it was the new month because we see that the horns of the new moon starting to come out. We can still see the edge. The Kedush Levanah. Levanah means white, and we see the whiteness of the moon come. So we know that the last couple of days was, the new month. And because back then, it was all word of mouth, horseback, whatever, however way they use, the ancient ways of getting messages around, it may have taken some time. So the rabbis thought, okay, we'll put a fence around the Torah. That's their term. And we'll make sure it's 2 days. That way, in case you miss it, in case you're late, at least you've done it. So now that it's modern times, why do we need the 2 days? We have science. We have ways of measuring these things. Why do we need to have the 2 days? Isn't that kind of archaic? Well, in Judaism, the rabbis have said, once something becomes a tradition, you keep doing it because it's tradition. And as a result, Judaism has become very, very ritualistic. And sometimes, unfortunately, people lose sight of the spirituality embedded in the ritual. And that's really kind of a shame. So in the last couple of seconds, let's mention that really quickly. All right. So for the full week, or out here in the diaspora, 8 days, no leavening. You got to watch your diet. You have matzah. You want to eat fruit with the matzah because we know what happens when you eat too much matzah. Okay. It's kind of a pain, right? Being kosher Pesach, it's a pain, right? It's a pain in the neck to do it. Folks, that's the point. One of the reasons we've survived is because, not just tradition, because we've had that discipline to stick to these rites. That's what kept us going. We've become tough. One of the reasons we fast during Yom Kippur is to prove to yourself, if you can abstain from food and drink for 26 hours, resisting sin and temptation causes sin during the rest of the year, you're used to it. It's easy. Well, not easy, but it becomes easier. Okay? So think about that. Shabbat Shalom. Hope to see you at services on Saturday. Thank you all for coming out for the Pesach. This week we have a Tat Shabbat at 5:45 on Friday. The little kids for half an hour. Regular service, adult service at 7. We have the regular service on Saturday. Actually, it's not regular. It's a child-friendly. We start at 9:45. We go to 11:15. And since it's the last day of Passover, we're going to have Yizkor. Hope to see you there. Thanks for listening. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.